Welcome back to Sports Video, our online course. And in this video, we're going to talk about camera operation basics. Let's jump into it. Sports video is all about camera operation, and there's a lot to it, but camera operation is just such an important part of this. These are key techniques for live sports production we're going to go over. How can we capture this great sports footage? And so much of it comes down to camera operators. Now, you can have a smartphone. It's obviously limited, but it allows you to capture things on the go. That's in level 1. You can get camcorders and PTZ cameras, and these allow you to kind of move and adjust cameras, and that's where we get to level 2 and level 3. And then there's broadcast cameras, which are really, really awesome. I'm going to show some examples of those as well. And broadcast cameras are the highest end cameras for sports production. Now, in general, I'm just going to give you some general tips because I think the bulk of our audience is just getting started and learning how to do camera operations. One of the first things you can do is practice during warm-ups. And you can see I have my son here. He's operating a camera with an Xbox controller, right? So this can be as simple as an Xbox controller for a kid. It could be as complicated as a giant jib, right, that's being used, or, as kind of in the middle here with like a tripod with operations. But if you have limited experience, practice during the warm-ups. Get started, familiarize yourself with the ability to move your camera. That's the key of being a camera operator. And then start to anticipate action, right? You need to stay ahead of the game. You need to anticipate where is the ball going. And in general, especially if you're just getting started, zoom out, okay? The wider your camera angle is, the easier it's going to be for you to capture that play. So you'll see here, like in this shot, for example, we've got a nice wide shot. We've got multiple angles as a producer that I can cut to. You can kind of see if you look, there's camera 1 down here, the very first one. They're so zoomed in, they're losing the action all the time. And that's okay. People who have to have the fully zoomed in shots, they oftentimes will lose the action. So the further you zoom out, the easier it's going to be for you. So for your more junior camera operators, definitely give them the ability to zoom out, right? And it'll be easier for them to keep the action in focus. The other thing as a camera operator, you should learn how to use your cameras. There's a couple key elements to camera operation that you should know about. Cameras, the two main things is the iris and the shutter speed. Okay, the iris is how far open, how much light is getting into the sensor of the camera through the lens. And then the shutter speed is how quickly the shutter opens and closes. A video camera is really a lot like a photography camera where it's just taking lots of pictures really, really quickly. And the shutter speed is something that we can actually lock to get really nice, smooth video. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. You can also do white balance. So just starting out, making sure that your camera is white balanced and that you've got the appropriate gain. Now, some producers, like in this production that I was doing here, we like to do all the camera correction and color correction before the camera operators are even on site. So that is very normal because you're trying to match multiple cameras together. So in some cases, we don't even need the camera operators to make those adjustments. The producers will do those adjustments, but just getting familiar with how it works so that you can make those micro adjustments as needed. Getting familiar with the camera speed. How quickly can the camera move to follow the game? And communicating to your team, what is your role? Because when you're working with different teams and team members, one of the things you'll notice is that you don't want to have, too many people doing the same thing, right? You don't want to have 2 wides and not have a tight, or 2 tights and no wide. So communicate with your team and determine, what is your role? What camera are you operating? You can see here we got a nice wide angle on the right side and then a behind the scenes camera on the left. Just know your role. Some people are going to be a close-up. Some people are going to be a wide. You don't want to have 2 people doing the same thing and then just, the producer doesn't know, who's doing what. Now, the 180-degree shutter speed rule is a really important rule that all sports broadcasters know about. Essentially, what this does is it establishes a very smooth frame rate. So essentially, what you do is you take the frame rate that you are recording at. Let's say it's 60 frames per second, and you double the shutter speed. So I'll give an example here. So let's say you're using 60 FPS, then you want a shutter speed of 1/120. Now, 60 FPS is very common in sports. So this is basically the shutter speed you want. That is why is that such a good thing? Because now you can lock the shutter speed at that, and you only need to adjust the iris. So you don't need to be adjusting the shutter speed. It can be locked at this known perfect shutter speed rule for 60 frames a second. Now, if you're in Europe and you're doing 50 FPS, then the shutter speed should be 1/100. And those are rules that you can follow. Get as close as you can to get really fast. The faster the shutter speed, the better the image, the crisper that image will be. But you also have to go over a balance of, natural movement speed. So shutter speed there is generally the same. You want all your cameras to generally have the same shutter speed so they have the same look and feel. Now, as you're operating a camera, framing is really everything. I think it's a really good idea to watch the sport that you're going to broadcast before you go and do it, right? Basketball is different than football, is different than soccer. Generally, you want to avoid too much headroom and unnecessary movements. So, you don't want to move the camera if you don't have to. You don't want to go, a lot of times panning up and left and right is a lot more natural than going up and down and tilting. So focus on where the action's headed. Don't worry about every little detail. Knowing your sport is so important. And I'm guessing that most people know these sports that they are broadcasting. But anticipate the fast movements and the action shifts. Sometimes there's stop and go, right? So you've got some downtime. And when you've got some downtime, ask your producer what they want to see from you. Some sports really like to have a wide angle, and basketball is one of them, where it's really wide. You're just getting the flow because it moves so quickly. And then tight shots are just used for reactions, right? For instant replays. So just know what you're doing and what your purpose is in the production. Now, for PTZ cameras, we can have the controller remote to the producer, right? So we can actually put a controller in the press box, for example, away from where the actual cameras are. So this camera is on the other side of the field. That provides a lot of power for the production team to have one or two PTZ camera operators who can work together but don't have to be right at the camera. We also have fixed cameras that are maybe in an end zone or a goal line, and then handheld cameras. You can have wireless cameras that can produce events and really get in on the action. So try to have smooth movements, anticipate the play, and if you're using a PTZ camera, adjust the speed, okay? This is an important tip. I'm going to go back to this PTZ camera controller that we were looking at a second ago. Essentially, you really want to adjust the speeds, and there's buttons on here to adjust the speeds. Those buttons right there allow you to adjust the tilt, the pan, and the zoom, and we'll talk about that because it allows you to really dial in. And you can see in this picture here, I've got two PTZ camera operators helping me live stream a professional sports team at the Wells Fargo Center. And you can see here how having 2 or 3 camera operators is really good if there's a lot of fast movement. So when you're using PTZ cameras, pan is going left to right, and that's ideally all you need to do. You want to do a very little amount of tilt. Tilt movements are good when you're revealing a space and zooming out, but you generally need to limit the tilt, and by doing so, you can reduce the speed of the tilt. So you can make the pan maybe fast enough to follow the fastest plays, but the tilt you generally don't need that much of. So I recommend having a slower tilt. And then the zoom. Another thing that you might not need if you're the wide angle camera guy, right? So the zoom is done with a twist of a joystick and or it could be potentially the movement of an Xbox controller, depending on how your setup is working. So something to think about, zooming in and out is fun. It reveals a lot of great information. But oftentimes during a live get play, you don't need the zoom as much as you might think. So if you're just getting started, focus on just following the play left and right. And then here's these PTZ speed options. There are PTZ camera presets that you can use to set a preset. So you can either manually control the camera or click a button to have the camera literally move exactly where you want it to go. So something to think about as well is setting up presets, setting up locations, whether it be at a goal point or a halfway mark. Set those presets before the game starts and write them down, or even have a little map next to you so that you can click those buttons super quick and get the PTZ cameras to move quickly. So the benefits of sports streaming are obviously great, and having a really good production team is super important. These are a couple extra slides that made it in. That is it for this camera operation video. So hopefully, you really consider how to be a camera operator. It takes experience, it takes time. We dig deeper into all of this in the book, of course, and let me know if you have any questions.